So Craig, why did you create Bitcoin?
Because I'm massively insane and I don't give up on things. But really, it comes down to there are lots and lots of attempts over the last 30 years actually to make a cryptocurrency type system, a payment system for the internet. That was always considered something necessary. We only fell back to ads later on because no one could figure out how do you get money, and you can't take credit cards, you can't do anything else. And I'm a stubborn bastard who just wouldn't give up on the problem.
You are very stubborn, Craig, very stubborn. And a bastard, too.
Well, no, my parents are actually married.
Very good bastard. So tell us, for the people in the audience who may not be as aware of some of the past attempts at digital currency, what were some others that came before Bitcoin?
So people don't seem to understand that Bitcoin wasn't the first peer-to-peer proof of work-based system. There were others by Rivest and others in 1996, such as PPPay, Micromint, Paymint, etc. It wasn't just DigiCash. DigiCash was sort of a bank-based blinded system, but there were also many peer systems. There were also systems built into other sort of things like eMule that had a currency system based on reputation of people doing uploads. And even those, I've mentioned Mojo Nation a few times. Lots of these systems actually existed, but the main thing none of them really considered was the economics. They didn't understand law and economics, and they tried to always skirt things and make it anonymous.
And why were the prior attempts at digital currency that tried to be anonymous, how did that cause them to fail?
What people don't understand is it always comes back to the same thing. Whenever you have a completely anonymous system, it brings out the worst in people. Plato actually brought this up nearly 2,500 plus years ago with a story of the Ring of Gyges. In the Ring of Gyges, a man finds a golden ring that enables him to become invisible. So this is before Lord of the Rings and whatever else. And once he finds it, he starts committing crimes. And as he gets away with each crime, it starts with small thefts, and he takes things that he wants. And then gradually, because he doesn't think he can ever be caught, it gets worse. He ends up murdering people, raping people, all sorts of things, until he basically takes over other people's kingdoms and things like that, because no one can stop him. So it eats away and corrodes our heart. And that's why it's called corruption. Why corrupt? Because when you're corrupt, it is a corrosive thing that eats away at you. Your soul disappears. And that's really the problem that people don't understand.
So did you think when you were creating the design of Bitcoin that it actually would be used to stop or reduce corruption?
A lot of it, yes. I mean, every single other attempt at cryptocurrency, whether you're looking at the more recent ones like Liberty Reserve and eGold, or the older ones like DigiCash, Mark Twain Bank, CHP, CLP, PPay, whatever else, they all basically became anonymous. They all sought to be outside of any control, and that invited crime. The first thing you get is you get people wanting to sell drugs, wanting to sell people, literally, people smuggling, money laundering. All that starts moving through these systems. It is not in an anonymous system the people who actually should be using it that start using it. It is the worst aspects of society. And it's not even government against it. The worst aspect of government happens in anonymity. When people can take money and not be traced, when it's completely anonymous, that's when you have corrupt police officials who will take bribes. It's when you have corrupt judges who will take bribes, corrupt politicians who take bribes. And that we don't want. Corrupt military people who take money. You can't have an anonymous system. In anonymity breeds everything that destroyed humanity.
So many people, including businesses, some consumers, and governments, are afraid of or skeptical of Bitcoin because some of its early first uses were for illegal activities, such as on the Silk Road dark market. And you're telling us that that's not what Bitcoin was designed to promote.
No, definitely not. What people don't realize is one of the worst things that happened to Bitcoin was a bunch of idiots thinking that they could create a heroin store back in August or so in 2010. It was where I started being disillusioned because I actually thought I'd really messed up. And the problem is actually the solution as well. Ross Ulbricht went to jail. Vanity Jones, his 2IC, was captured earlier this year in a now in a Thai prison, and he's in jail. And overall, over 1,000 people have gone to jail because of this.
So, I have a copy of the white paper here, thanks to our friend Jimmy Nguyen. And it uses, if you've read the white paper, and I encourage everyone to go back and reread it, the word honest 15 times in here. Why was it so important for you to repeat the concept of honest and honesty so much in the white paper?
It's about honest money. For a time, and one of the things that finally made me get it was I worked for an auditor. I did the creation of CATS, which is computer-aided audit techniques, and DATS, digital audit techniques for the auditing of public companies. And I was writing software to enable fraud detection. And one thing I found is practically and I'll actually say every company I ever looked at that was a public company had fraud. Not all of it was material, and materiality is generally set at 5%. But the problem was you would have hundreds of small frauds, and that actually makes a huge impact to the bottom line. Imagine you're a company making 4% profit, and I found companies out there that had 4% profit and 5 or 6% total fraud or other misappropriation. Imagine what that company could do if that money wasn't stolen, if they could pay their staff more, if they could market better, if they could put money into research and development. Think how fast that would actually change economies. Right now, we're in a world where we're saying 1 or 2% growth is good. Imagine if we could actually take that 4 or 5% of fraud, remove it, and making that into building society. So, how does your experience as an auditor, because I think not everyone knows you work professionally as an auditor for many years, how does that experience inform or influence the design of Bitcoin? So one of the things working in auditing organizations is if you have multiple ledgers, you can cheat. If you can change a ledger, you can cheat. Under Sarbanes-Oxley, Section 302, 404, etc. in the US, after Enron, every company who is a public company has to have records that are immutable, that they can't change. This is a US law for nearly 20 years now.
For public companies in the United States.
Yeah, for public companies in the US, and that applies to all sorts of things, even their social media and things like that. Now, the problem here is you still have things like Bernie Madoff. You have huge frauds. Why? Because if you're writing to a DVD or a CD or some worm media that can't be changed, how do you know there's only one copy? And this is the thing. Bernie Madoff had immutable records. As a hedge fund manager, he kept everything in a way that could not be changed. What he did was he had multiple records. He had one set of records for when he was audited by one company, another set to give a customer, another set again to give a different customer, another set to give his internal staff, another set to do the backroom office. There were many, many sets of records. And this is really why, when I said there's only one ledger, it has to be one ledger, and why it has to be public. Because soon as you can actually have something that's private, it's not a blockchain. Section 3 of the white paper actually details the fact that you have to publish If you don't publish, then you can change. If I've got a private Ethereum blockchain, nothing's stopping me from running up 1,000 versions of that private blockchain with every set of history that possibly happens. Literally, it costs me hundreds of dollars to commit any change. So this whole nature of, I can have a private blockchain, no you can't. It's not a blockchain if it's private. To be private means to be hidden. To be public is where you put the hash so that everyone can see it. That's the nature of Bitcoin. It's a system where everyone gets that hash and no one can ever change.
And by Section 3, you're referring to Section 3 of the white paper, which is entitled Timestamp Server. And there's an important sentence that says, a timestamp server works by taking a hash of a block of items to be timestamped and widely publishing the hash. And widely publishing the hash.
Correct. So that's actually a scaling thing. Now, I could widely publish the entire transaction. But if you're going to publish the entire blocks, the entire transaction, then you need to store a lot of data, which is fine for a commercial miner who has to store these things. But every person on Earth shouldn't be storing it. Why do you use a hash? It's a message digest. So I take a really, really big file, something maybe the size of the Oxford Dictionary, all 22 volumes, not the congested one, and I can shrink that down to a few lines of text, and that's all I need now. And that little tiny line of text can prove that entire dictionary has never been changed. That's why we have a hash.
So let's talk about how this affects your views on the distinction between a global public blockchain, Bitcoin, and what a lot of the industry calls a private blockchain, but you, as you said, would not even call them a private blockchain. I call them a permissioned ledger, or when consortiums of companies get together and create their own system, like the R3 consortium and Ripple, for example, or Facebook's Libra consortium. In your belief, that's not even really a blockchain because it's not public, it's a controlled, permissioned, private ledger system. Why is it important in your mind that the blockchain be public to fight corruption and create honesty versus a private permissioned ledger?
So if you take something, if you look at Ripple, the Ripple network at the moment has 80% of nodes are run by Ripple. That means effectively Ripple can change anything they want. So you sit there and you go, well, I trust Ripple. Why? Because Ripple would never rip me off. Why not? Hasn't the entire problem with every major fraud been opportunity? If we're looking at Bernie Madoff and billions stolen, or Enron, or WorldCom, all of these companies happened to commit fraud because they had opportunity. What happens when Ripple maybe goes down and loses a lot of money, when they're in the hole for $20 billion? How do we know they won't change the records? Do we just trust them? The nature of Bitcoin is such that we don't need to just trust. Any change, any alteration, anything that had to be done would be public. Everyone will see. If something's changed on the ledger, anyone can see the hash does not match. We don't want a system where some company dictates what our money system is, what our source of truth is. We want a system that can't be changed, that can't be altered.
And that's why we refer to the Bitcoin blockchain as the universal source of truth that everyone can rely on. What would you predict is going to be the future of these private or permissioned ledger systems?
So, anyone here remember banyan vines? No? No old buggers like me? How about DECnet? IPX? Oh, we got an IPX guy. Bindery? No? All of these were network protocols that competed with the internet. X500? No? Every one of these was around in the 90s, And X500 was actually way more technically superior than anything to do with TCP/IP. It was one of the